All right, welcome to the first screencast for Chapter 9. In this chapter, we're going to talk about competitive markets for different goods and services. In this first section, we're going to talk about perfect competition, and this is going to be our model that we're going to use for the next couple chapters in the book. So, what are the learning objectives here? Well, you should be able to explain what economists mean by perfect competition. You should be able to identify the basic assumptions of the model of perfect competition, and you should be able to explain why the perfect competition model implies price-taking behavior. All right. So what is perfect competition? In perfect competition, all the firms in the market face competition from a lot of other firms. All right. So today we're going to develop this highly idealized form of competition that we're going to call perfect competition. So what are some of the different assumptions of this model? Well, the first is that all goods are identical. In a perfectly competitive market, one good is the same as any other good. So if it's a market for widgets, all the widgets are identical. If it's a market for oil, every unit of oil is identical. So all the goods are interchangeable with one another. So a bushel of wheat from one farmer is the same as a bushel of wheat from another farmer. Customers don't have brand loyalty. All they care about is price, because one unit of the good is the same as any other unit. So all they really care about if they're going to purchase the good is the price. All right. So this is one of the assumptions that we'll need to be able to say that firms and consumers are price takers. That means they can't influence the price. We're going to talk about that a little more in a minute. But if one farmer's wheat was perceived as having some sort of special properties, like it was name brand wheat, or it was more resistant to disease or something like that, then that would make it a different good, and it wouldn't be identical. So that would violate the assumption. So another thing economists sometimes say is that the goods in a perfectly competitive market are homogeneous, meaning that any one good I pull out of the market is the same as any other good. It's homogeneous, meaning everything is the same. All right. Another assumption for the market of perfect competition is that there's a large number of buyers and sellers. The reason we assume this is that it means that no buyer and no seller can influence the price. The firms are price takers. The buyers are price takers. Firms and consumers will respond to changes in the price, but none of them can affect the prices. All right. This is also true for the factors of production. The firm can't influence the price that they pay for the different factors of production. They can respond to it, but they can't influence it directly. And of course, firms also respond to the prices of its output. Right? Another assumption of the market, of the model of perfect competition, is the ease of entry and exit. So that means that a firm in a market doesn't just have to deal with the firms in the market now that they're competing against, but they also have to worry that other firms could enter into the market. So what this will mean for us is, if entry is easy, then if we see really high profits in a particular market, we should expect firms to enter into that market. All right. So that's going to be kind of a key thing that drives some of the results from this model. If entry is difficult, then the firms would not enter into the market if there were high profits. All right. The model also assumes that exit is easy also. So if suddenly there are losses in the market, everyone's losing money, firms can easily move to a different market, can switch out and go to something else. This also makes entry easier. So if a firm only has to worry about, if I enter, am I going to get locked in and it's going to be hard to leave? No. In this model, we assume that if they come in and they find out there's no profits, they can just as easily leave. The last assumption I want to talk about is the assumption of complete information. So sellers have complete information about prices, technology, just about everything that you can think of. All sellers know about all of those things in the market. No seller has any special information about production methods. There's no trade secrets here. There's no special sauce. There's none of that sort of thing. Everyone knows how to produce the good. So again, what this means is every firm is identical to one another, making identical sorts of goods. All right. So if we violated this, if one seller had some sort of advantage over other sellers, or they had special information, or they would no longer be a price taker. All right. Buyers know the prices offered by every seller in the market. And if they didn't know that, then one firm, think of a water seller out in the desert. They could take advantage of the buyers. They could all charge a really high price. So we're assuming that buyers, there's lots of buyers, lots of sellers. Everyone knows everything about the prices for everything, so buyers can't be taken advantage of. All right. The other aspect of complete information is that new information can be obtained at low cost. So if the price changes, everyone learns about it instantly. All right. Consumers and firms can obtain information at a low cost, and so that means they will go find that information. All right. So they have as much information as they could possibly want about the good in question. So everyone buys and sells goods and services at market prices because they all know the market prices and they know them instantaneously. All right, that's how this particular model works. What are some of the implications of the perfect competition model? Well, the assumptions of a perfectly competitive market model ensure that everyone is a price taker. All of those assumptions together give us that everyone is always a price taker. So it's the market, not individual consumers or firms, that sets the price in the market. Right? It comes from the supply and demand diagrams that we've seen before. That's going to be part of this model of perfect competition. Right? So no individual has the power to have an impact on price. There's no one firm like a monopoly that can set the price. There's no one buyer, we call that a monopsony, that can influence the price. Right? I want to remind us about something here. Some of these assumptions are very, very strong. And we have to remember that we're thinking of this model as a map. And the idea is that this map can help us better understand the world. It doesn't mean that all markets are perfectly competitive. It doesn't even mean most of them are. But what it means is this is going to serve at least as a baseline as we move forward for, well, what happens when we don't have all of these assumptions? What happens when there's not lots of buyers and sellers? What happens when there's not complete information? All right. So this model will serve as a baseline, but it also, I think, helps us understand some markets. There are a lot of markets that get really close to this sort of perfect competition. All right. But no market fully meets all these conditions. All right. As always, models are maps. They're trying to help us understand the way things work. All right. It's going to be really useful. It's going to be helpful for us in understanding how a lot of different markets work. All right. So what about the real world, though? Well, firms don't just sit back and let the market determine price, right? They would love to set the price if they could. They try to find different ways, brand loyalty. They try to find better production techniques that other firms don't have. They try lots of different things in order to gain advantages that are not in this model of perfect competition, all right? But when we're modeling here in perfect competition, we assume the market forces determine the prices, and that's it. Right? Everyone is a price taker. The model is not true or false. It's just useful or not useful. And as it turns out, economists think we can gain a lot of useful insight by using this model of perfect competition. All right? In later chapters, we will see that some markets require a different model because we violate a lot of these assumptions. All right? So the other thing about the real world is increasingly markets have become more and more competitive. Over time, around the world, we've gotten closer and closer to meeting these assumptions. A firm can enter the world market by simply creating a web page to advertise its products. Right? Why can they do this? Well, transportation costs has gotten really, really low. Shipping costs has gotten really, really low. And advances in telecommunications have made it very cheap to find customers, very cheap for them to find you, very cheap to send money over the internet. So entering mini markets is now open to all firms all over the world. All right, well that's the end of the first screencast. I'm gonna slice up some of these sections into smaller parts going forward. So I think there's going to be about 5 screencasts for this chapter just to kind of chunk it up into more bite-sized pieces. All right, I'll see you in the next screencast.